All right, so what we're going to do here, what I want to show you is how to pull off this orange seal. If you take some very fine point tweezers, you can kind of dig underneath and pull that seal off. That'll give you access to the inside. As you can see, those are actually ceramic balls against the stainless inner and outer races. So what I've heard is that these will be noisier, just because of their chemical makeup. The ceramic balls are a little bit are denser, so they tend to be a little bit louder. And I've read that you can put a dab of oil to quiet them down a little bit. So I think that that's what I'm going to do. If not so much for the noise, just for the simple fact that there is some fluid in there. So I'm putting about half a drop on each side, and I've even heard you can leave the seal off. Um, but I'm going to go ahead and pop this one back on. And then you could just seat it by pushing down a little bit. I've also read that the seal itself is what causes a little bit of the friction and will kind of minimize free spool, but I'm not really concerned too much with that. All right, so I've added the brake side spool bearing here and the drive gear side spool bearing here. And so that's essentially the tear down side of it, and this is the start of the reassembly. So it's looking really good. Everything's looking really clean. So before we start putting too much stuff back together on this side, I do want to show you how I like to apply the grease. So a good rule of thumb is when you take it off, when you take this cap off for the first time, you can kind of see where there was grease. That's essentially what you're trying to replicate. Again, I don't think you need too much, but what I do like to use is the Shimano grease. I also like to use the pen grease as well. So what I usually do is I'll take a small little hobby brush here, and I'll start with the pen grease, and I like to give a light coat on a majority of the surfaces, just to kind of help capture any dirt particles that might come in to the side of the reel. So you can kind of just see I'm just very lightly brushing this on to help a little bit with water runoff if the water ever did make it into this side plate. There's a little bit of protection here. Great. Now for some of these moving pieces, like this plastic ring here and this idle gear and around the aluminum mechanism, I usually like to use some of the Shimano grease. So I'm going to take some of that and start running it like those ramps that I was talking about earlier that engage the that were for the yoke. I like to start there, picking some up, and also for this is for the thumb bar engagement. So I like to put some around that. Kind of see where I'm getting there. And last, I'll get this idle gear. I like these brushes because it enables me to kind of get up in there where I maybe wouldn't be able to reach with a Q-tip or another other blunt type object. So this kind of lets me work it in there. Sweet. So now that we have that done, we can start reassembling some of these pieces. It's pretty much just a reverse order here. The way you took it off is the way that you're going to start putting it back in. So as long as you laid everything out in a line here like I did, you should be pretty straight. It's pretty straightforward. I was really intimidated initially on on how these things came apart, but it's not that bad. So since we before I put the drag grease away, I should have showed you guys how I like to oil it up or grease it up rather. So I just like to put a nice thin coat here on the main surface of that gear, and then the same on this side. Just a nice light coat. And you can work the drag washers with your fingers to get it in there if you want. I just like to coat them with a brush. Just kind of see that, just a light coat, both sides. Just work it in. The other one. Okay. We're going to reinstall the yoke frame. You want to line up the holes here. Let's see if I can show you that. Something like that. A good little tip too is for these smaller screws. Makes it really easy if you kind of dip the tip into some of that grease. Makes it really easy to grab them. Right? Now the main gear shaft, I'm going to add a dab of some Real X here for that bottom bearing. Why it was a little tight there. There we go. Now this had a little locking screw that kind of goes off here to the side. I discovered I didn't really need to remove that. Just make sure this is a really short one, so it doesn't really fit anywhere else. Make sure you put that back in.